Hello, dear listeners. Vitally speaking, we present a new story on the Audiorakaz channel. Tell us in the comments where in the world you listen to our stories. Enjoy. A dusty road wound between yellowed birch trees. A September evening slowly descended on the Moscow region, painting the sky in deep crimson tones. Dmitry Severtsev gripped the steering wheel tighter and opened the window slightly. Cool air scented with rotting leaves and a distant campfire wafted into the old Ford. 2 more hours and I'll be home, he thought, adjusting the rear-view mirror. The work week had drained him of all his energy. The trip to Tver to pick up an antique chest of drawers had been exhausting. The client had changed the terms 3 times, but Dmitry persevered. In the furniture business, especially a family-run one, the customer is always right. Even if that client was a capricious heiress to an ancient estate unable to distinguish oak from mahogany. The heavy autumn sun sank below the horizon. The shadows from the roadside trees lengthened, and Dmitry's thoughts grew heavier. Another weekend in an empty house lay ahead. Work in the workshop, evening scrambled eggs, and early night. No one to greet him, ask how his day was, nuzzle his shoulder with a warm nose, or share simple moments of life. The phone rang unexpectedly, breaking the pensive silence. His mother seemed to sense his mood. Dmitry sighed and pressed the speakerphone button. Dima, son, are you coming home already? Tamara Ilyinichna's voice sounded excited. Yes, Mom, I picked up the chest of drawers from the client. I'll start the restoration tomorrow. Is it a long way? Are you tired? These simple questions conveyed the unwavering care he'd felt throughout his 40 years. Okay, I'll be home in a couple of hours. There was a short pause. Dmitry knew what would happen next. This conversation repeated itself over and over again, only growing with new details. Done. Claudia Petrovna from the library says her niece is coming from St. Petersburg. A cultured young woman, an art historian. Mom, he interrupted softly. Let's not today. Domochka, at 40 you can't live like a granny. The years are flying by. Your father is worried. Look, his heart started to ache again last week. Dmitry winced painfully. This was a forbidden move, mentioning his father's health. How did he ask me about this topic? He's cheerful, of course, but you know yourself for years. And I want to see my grandchildren while I'm alive. Another pause hung heavy, like a pre-storm cloud. I remember what happened with the radish, the mother continued, but not all women are like that. There are real ones who will understand your choice, Regina. The name of his ex-wife echoed with a dull ache. 5 years had passed, but his memory obligingly threw up images. Her disdainful glance at his calloused hands, his deliberately loud phone conversations with friends about the potential buried in the village. His demonstrative sighs at the sight of his father's old house. Dima, we could have lived in Moscow with your hands and my connections. It didn't work out. His roots held him fast. His father's workshop, the family business, the house he built with his own hands. Regina wanted the glamour of the capital, restaurant dinners, and a ring with a larger stone. 3 years of being pulled in different directions until it finally failed completely. Mom, I understand everything, but I won't rush happiness. Well, what a philosopher said. A smile could be heard in his mother's voice. Okay, son, come over for dinner tomorrow. Dad made a new stool using the old plans. He definitely wants to show it off. And maybe you should ask a girl out. One last try. That's it. I'm quiet. Have a safe trip. Be careful driving. Dmitry smiled, turning off his phone. For as long as he could remember, his mother had always tried to arrange his personal life. At school, she'd slipped him the girl from next door for lessons. She saw him off to the army with the words, "Look, don't let an officer's daughter go." For his 35th birthday, she gave him a shirt with the words, "No one can resist this." Only these were all wrong. How to explain to his mother that he needed an unsuccessful marriage, an unworthy match, and something real, to breathe the same air, to feel each other through the wall, to wake up in the morning. Then the first thought was she. It had completely darkened outside. The headlights snatched at pieces of wet asphalt, yellow leaves, road signs from the darkness. His stomach reminded him of itself. It was time to stop, stretch his legs, and have a snack. Ahead, the lights of a roadside gas station flickered. Dmitri turned on the turn signal. Another evening on the road. Another conversation with his mother about his unsuccessful life. Another night in an empty house. Tomorrow is Saturday, the day of assembling a new buffet for a family from a neighboring village. Not so little, if you think about it. Many don't even they have. The gas station was going about its usual evening routine. Tire truckers were warming themselves with coffee from the vending machine. A couple of local men were working under the hood of an old Lada. The cashier flirted with a security guard. Dmitri leisurely filled his car with gas, bought a sandwich and tea from the convenience store, and stepped outside. A damp autumn wind ruffled his hair. Dmitri leaned against his car, chewing on tasteless store-bought bread and observing the scene from the gas station. His gaze caught a strange sight. At the far corner of the station, 3 young men, clearly tipsy, were circling a frail girl with a small mongrel on a leash. The dog bared its teeth and growled, and the girl, pressed against the wall, answered the men, holding the leash tightly. "Beauty, come with us, let's have some fun," a drunken voice reached Dmitri. "Leave me alone." The girl's glum but tense voice rang out clearly in the evening air. "Come on, you're not touching me. What kind of scary dog bites?" One of the guys reached out to the dog, and it growled louder. "Hey, are you the one hitchhiking on the highway with your mutt? So we'll give you a lift." The second one laughed, grabbing the girl by the elbow. Dmitri automatically peeled himself away from the car. How many times had he told himself not to meddle in other people's business, but something in this girl's presence, the way she held herself with dignity in front of the insolent guys, made him move forward. "Hey guys," he called out, coming closer. "The girl doesn't want to talk to you. Move away." The 3 turned around. One, in a leather jacket, took a step forward. "Who the hell are you? You should go about your business." A dull wave of irritation rose inside Dmitri. It had been a hard day, and a day off with his mother was going to be difficult. And then these young fools. "I said move away from the girl," he repeated quietly, looking the guy straight in the eyes. And the fact that the guy leaned forward. Dmitri slowly unbuttoned his jacket and slightly moved the hem, revealing the hilt of a souvenir dagger that he always carried with him. A gift from his grandfather, a frontline soldier. A metal hilt with the engraved date 1945 gleamed faintly in his memory. "I'm a veteran," he said slowly. "The Chechen campaign, and my nerves are gone for good while I'm calm." He'd never been to Chechnya, and the dagger is just a memory, not a weapon. But something in his eyes, in his entire figure, made the guys flinch. "Come on, man," one of them chuckled uncertainly. "We just, quickly get in the car." Dmitri pronounced each word separately with a precise intonation. The guys exchanged glances, muttering something, and slowly retreated. A minute later, their battered Volkswagen was leaving the gas station. Dmitri exhaled and turned to the girl. In the dim light of the street lamp, he made out a pale face with huge, frightened eyes. The dog at her feet growled softly, but no longer bared its teeth. "Are you okay?" he asked, not coming closer. "Yes, thank you." The girl's voice was low, with a slight croak. "Are you really a veteran?" Dmitri smiled apologetically. "No, it just worked." "And the dagger is a memory of my grandfather. He walked with it from Moscow to Berlin." The girl nodded and relaxed slightly. She was very young, about 20 years old, no more. Fragile, with chestnut hair pulled back into a careless ponytail, a worn denim jacket, an old backpack over her shoulders, in her hands, only a leash with a dog. "My name is Dmitri," he introduced himself. "Var, and this is Tishka." She nodded at the dog, who had already calmed down and was sniffing Dmitri's boots. "Are you here alone? Hitchhiking?" The girl hesitated, as if deciding whether to trust a casual acquaintance. Something in her gaze was so wary, like that of an animal accustomed to danger. "You must be in a hurry," she finally replied. "Thank you for your help. We can handle it." "Where are you heading?" "It's late for hitchhiking." Dmitri nodded at the darkening sky. Varya bit her lip. Tishka pressed himself against her leg, as if understanding her hostess's hesitation. Honestly, I don't know, she finally admitted. I'm just driving. Her frankness surprised Dmitri. He was used to people twisting and turning, making up beautiful stories, but this girl simply told the truth. Maybe you could tell me what happened, he suggested cautiously. I can help. The small cafe at the gas station smelled of cheap coffee and belishi. They were sitting by the window. Tishka dozed at the girl's feet. Varya warmed her hands on a plastic cup of tea and told him, I'm from Riev. I live with my mother and mother's father. He hesitated, choosing his words, drank and got physical. First to my mother, then to me, in different ways. Dmitri tensed internally, realizing what she was talking about. When she became completely out of the magistrate, I told my mother, but she didn't believe me. She said I was making it all up to break them up. Varya looked out the window as if she saw her past life there. 2 days ago, he tried to climb in again. I grabbed a frying pan and threatened him. Then he made a scene. Mom took his aside and told me to get out. What about your father? Dmitri asked quietly. He lives in Kaluga. I called and asked to stay. He said to come over, but when I arrived, she smiled bitterly. His wife met him at the door, said she didn't need any stepdaughter and that I shouldn't dare show up again. My father didn't even come out to talk. She paused, collecting her thoughts, spent the night at the station, and in the morning discovered that her bag with money and documents had been stolen. All that was left was her passport in her jacket pocket. She decided to get to Moscow. She thought she'd find at least some kind of work there to rent a place. And a dog? Dmitri nodded at the dozing dog. Varya smiled for the first time, brightly, openly, for a moment becoming a very young girl. Tishka strayed near the store yesterday evening. He was sitting there wet and hungry. I gave him half a loaf of bread, and he followed me. So we've been walking together. Dmitri looked at this fragile girl with a tattered backpack at the shaggy mongrel at her feet, and something stirred in his soul. Not pity, no, rather respect for the dignity with which she held herself. Varya, he began slowly. I have a proposition. I live not far from here, in my own house. It's an hour's drive away in a small village. I have a family furniture workshop inherited from my father. I need help around the house and with paperwork. And I see you have experience working with documents. I worked in the village administration for 3 years after technical school, she answered cautiously. Accounting documents. What are you offering? A room, food, and a little money to start. Will you help with cleaning, with the paperwork in the workshop? We'll see about that. We'll pay, and you can go wherever you want with a decent amount of money in your pocket. Varya was silent for a long time, studying his face. Then she turned her gaze to the car outside, the window to the dark road to the sleeping Tishka. Why do you want to help? She asked bluntly. Dmitri shrugged. I don't know myself. Maybe because he's tired of coming back to an empty house. It was true, but not entirely. Something about this girl touched his soul. Maybe her directness. Maybe the dignity with which she held herself in a difficult situation. Can I bring the dog? She asked after a pause. Of course, I have a big yard. He'll like it. Varya looked around the cafe and to the road outside the window, again as if weighing all the options. You know, she finally said with quiet determination, things can't get any worse than this. I agree. When they emerged into the cool air, the sky was already strewn with stars. Tishka trotted briskly alongside, as if approving of his mistress's decision. Dmitri opened the car door, helping Varya into the passenger seat. Home? He asked, starting the engine. Home, she echoed, and something in that simple word sounded like a promise. The morning greeted them with the clear freshness of autumn. The first rays of sunlight breaking through the golden foliage drew intricate patterns on the ground. When Dmitri turned onto the dirt road leading to the house, here we are, he said, stopping the car in front of a 2-story wooden building with carved window frames. Varya, who had fallen asleep on the way, blinked sleepily, looking around. The Severitsev house, paneled in dark wood and set among the apple trees of the orchard, looked like a ship in a green-yellow sea. A short distance away, a well-built timber workshop with wide windows was visible. Beautiful, she exhaled, getting out of the car. Tishka jumped out after her, warily sniffing the new scents. Father built it in '93, Dmitri said with undisguised pride. Back then, everything was falling apart and he'd say we live poorly, but we build well. He chopped down the first floor himself, then hired help. He grabbed her backpack and headed toward the house. Varya looked around the yard, the garden, the outbuildings with interest. Everything exuded solidity and a strong peasant mind. Nothing superfluous, everything is functional, but with that special care when every board is laid with love for the craft. Here's your room. Dmitri opened the door on the second floor. Varya froze on the threshold. After nights at the station, after the cramped room in her parents' house where the walls seemed to press down on her shoulders, this bright corner seemed like an island of paradise. A wooden bed with a patchwork bedspread, a chest of drawers with handles darkened by time, a wooden wardrobe, and a small desk by the window overlooking the garden. "It's so cozy here," she muttered, afraid to believe her luck. "Grandma's furniture," Dmitri shrugged. "Make yourself comfortable. There's a towel and bed linen in the closet, the bathroom is at the end of the hall, and in the meantime I'll organize breakfast." Left alone, the accident carefully touched the lace napkin on the dresser, stroked the wooden headboard. An unfamiliar feeling spread through her chest. Like after a long run, you can finally stop and catch your breath. "Master, and I see the car is parked." A loud voice rang out from the yard as she and Dmitri were finishing breakfast. A broad-shouldered man of about 30 with a reddish beard and a mischievous gleam in his eyes burst into the kitchen. "Oh, we have guests." He stared at Varya with curiosity. "Boss, meet Varvara," Dmitri introduced calmly. "She will help with the paperwork and around the house. Var, this is Stanislav, my partner at the workshop." "Nice to meet you." Varya nodded shyly. "Likewise." Stas smiled broadly. Image had gotten completely lost in his drawings, at least. Now there'll be some order. Incidentally, he turned to Dmitri. "Regarding the oak set for the Sidorovs, the wood has arrived, but there are problems with the fittings." The men immersed themselves in a work-related conversation. Varya began clearing the table. She listened to their conversation out of the corner of her ear, noting how Dmitri's voice changed when he talked about work. The firm, confident tones of a master of his craft appeared. That evening, Stas brought his wife Anya and their 2 twin sons, noisy 5-year-old boys. Anya, a plump woman with kind eyes, brought a fresh apple pie and immediately took Varya under her wing. "It's a good thing Dima finally hired a helper," she said matter-of-factly, helping set out the cups. "I've been nagging him non-stop. Can a man look after a house, especially one as passionate as our Dmitri Valentinovich?" Tishka, who had initially cowered warily at his mistress's feet, quickly became friends with Stas's yard dog, the shaggy Buyan. By evening, they were already running around the village, scaring away the last autumn birds. "Look how your guy settled in," Stas nodded, looking out the window at the dogs scuffling, "as if he's lived here his whole life." "Just like me," Varya thought unexpectedly. Life quickly settled into a routine. Varya woke up with the first rays of the sun, made breakfast, and then got down to her duties. Dmitri, to her surprise, didn't demand much. The usual cleaning of the house, help with the workshop's paperwork, the occasional trip to the neighboring town for materials. But she wanted to be useful. Over the years of working in the administration, she had become accustomed to keeping paperwork in order. One day, having received Dmitri's permission, she took on the order archive, dozens of folders with drawings, estimates, and contracts. "What are you doing?" he asked in surprise, finding her sorting through papers in the evening. "Organizing," Varya answered simply. "Look, you have all your orders piled up in one pile, and if we sorted it by furniture type, client, and year, it would be much easier to search." Dmitri watched with interest as she deftly sorted documents, signed new folders, and compiled an inventory. "Where did you learn to do that?" "In the administration. Every piece of paper counts there." Varya smiled. "And I also noticed that your varnishes and paints are stored haphazardly in the warehouse. Can I tidy that up?" "Up to." A week later, the warehouse was unrecognizable. All the materials were categorized. A catalog of everything was compiled. Even Stas whistled. "Well, Varvara Sergeyevna, you're amazing. You've been struggling for so many years, and you've brought such order to it in just a few days." Dmitri simply looked at her with undisguised respect, and there was something else in his gaze, an something that warmed Varya's heart, making her want to do even more, even better. On cold October evenings, they often sat in the kitchen drinking tea. Dmitri talked about the intricacies of woodworking, the properties of different types of wood, and the secrets of the old masters. Varya listened with bated breath. His words conveyed more than just a love of the craft, but a deep understanding of the soul of wood. Every log has its own character, he said, turning a piece of maple in his hands. Oak is stubborn, wayward, you have to negotiate with it. But linden is softer, pliable. There is no better material for carving. One day he caught her doing something strange. Arya was sitting by the window with a sketchbook and a pencil, intently drawing something. Sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. Dmitri backed away. No, everything is fine. Varya became embarrassed and tried to close the sketchbook. Can I have a look? He asked cautiously. She hesitated, but then handed over the sketchbook. The sheet depicted a garden, an autumn apple tree, a carved gazebo, a path to the workshop. A simple pencil drawing, but it conveyed the soul of the place. You draw beautifully, Dmitri said in amazement, turning the pages. There were other sketches, too. A view from the window. Tishka, the dozing stove, Stas's hands working with a plane. Pure adoration. Varya shrugged. She'd loved to draw since childhood, but my parents thought it was a waste of time. Mom wanted me to study to be an accountant. A solid profession. There'll always be bread. Dmitri turned another page and froze. There was a sketch of a sideboard, but one like he'd never seen before. Classic forms combined with graceful floor elements, giving the furniture a light and airy feel. Was that your idea? He looked up at her. Yes. She looked down, embarrassed. Your work had inspired her. I just thought I could add these elements. Inconvenience. Nonsense, of course. But not nonsense. Dmitri examined the drawing carefully. It was a very fresh take. You know, we could try something like that, really. Varya asked incredulously. Absolutely. I just have a client who wants something unusual for the living room. If you don't mind, I'll show him your sketches. From that day on, Varya began to draw openly, not furtively. Her sketchbook grew filled with sketches of furniture, decorative elements, and interior design solutions. Dmitri often discussed ideas with her, making technical adjustments, but always respecting her artistic vision. 6 months flew by. Winter covered the village with a blanket of snow, and then gave way to a timid spring. The days were filled with leisurely work and quiet joys. In the evening, she and Tishka strolled around the neighborhood, talking about everything under the sun or simply remaining silent. That special silence of loved ones when words are superfluous. Varya increasingly found herself thinking that for the first time in her life she felt truly needed. Her ideas were embodied in beautiful pieces of furniture that brought joy to people. Her care transformed the house, making it even more comfortable. Even Tishka, a frightened stray, had transformed into a sedate dog, proudly pacing his domain. Dmitri had changed too. Stas often joked about how his master had become less of a fixture in the workshop in the evening. So, you used to be so hard to get him home, but now look, the clock strikes 6 and Dimitri's already taking off his apron. He'd laugh. Dmitri waved him off, but he knew he longed to get back to the house where it smelled of freshly baked goods, where Tishka greeted him joyfully at the door, where Varya looked up from her sketchbook and smiled as he were the most important person in the world. In the evenings, they often sat by the fireplace. Varya drew, Dmitri read or worked on his plans. Sometimes their hands would accidentally touch as they reached for the same thing. Then, for a moment, a strange, sweet feeling would scorch them both. But neither of them dared to upset the delicate balance that had been established. Dmitri was afraid of frightening her with his feelings. He felt too simple for such a vibrant girl. Varya believed she had no right to dream of more. A roof over her head and a good relationship already seemed like incredible happiness to her. One evening, as they sat in the gazebo, watching the last rays of sun gild the treetops, Dmitri suddenly said, I don't know. I can't even imagine how I lived here alone. It's as if the house had always been waiting for you. Varya looked up at him, her eyes full of unspoken feelings. At that moment she wanted to say so much, but she only quietly replied, "Me too." Tishka, as if understanding the gravity of the moment, laid his head on Varya's lap and sighed peacefully. A spring breeze carried the scent of apple blossoms. The world around him breathed hope and the promise of happiness. The June regional exhibition Furniture Makers Fair was a true triumph for Dmitry. A sideboard designed by Varya received a special jury prize for its originality and adherence to tradition. The Sevetsev workshop booth was never empty. Visitors admired the work samples of all placed orders and recorded their phone numbers. Dmitry Valentinovich heard a female voice behind him as he was gathering documents at the end of the second day of the exhibition. "Allow me to introduce myself. Victoria Igorevna Lebedeva, head of sales at Interior, Lux." Dmitry turned and saw a striking woman in a formal business suit. Her chestnut hair was perfectly coiffed, her attentive gaze sweeping appraisingly across the booth. "Very nice to meet you." He extended his hand. "Your work has caused a real sensation." Victoria smiled, revealing her pearly whites. "We could discuss the possibility of collaboration over dinner. There's a wonderful restaurant nearby." Something in her confident, business-like demeanor, with a hint of elegant persistence, reminded Dmitry of his ex-wife. But unlike Regina, Victoria spoke knowledgeably about furniture, asked the right questions, and suggested concrete steps to develop the business. 2 glasses of wine transformed the business dinner into something more. Victoria proved to be an engaging conversationalist, well-read with a good sense of humor and a keen understanding of art. Before parting, they arranged to meet again. The next 2 months seemed to ensue for Dmitry. Victoria helped organize deliveries of his furniture to major salons, introduced him to the right people, and taught him how to effectively present his work. At the same time, their personal relationships developed: theater, restaurants, and an exhibition. After many years of loneliness, Dmitry suddenly experienced a taste of a different life, vibrant, rich, and full of new opportunities. He was now home less often. Returning late in the evening, he would find Varya working on new sketches or with a book in hand. She never asked where he had been, only quietly inquired if dinner was warmed up. "You must introduce her to me," Victoria declared one evening as they sat in a summer cafe. "I want to see how's your studio? I want to understand what I'm dealing with." And now she stood in the middle of the living room, appraising the simple, sturdy furniture, the old photographs on the walls, the 2 cross-stitched napkins. "Charming," she said in a tone that Dmitry detected condescension in each. "Such an authentic country style." Varya, silent and tense, brought tea and pie. Teshka, usually friendly with guests, for some reason hid under the table and warily watched the visitor. "Varvara, right?" Victoria smiled without touching the treat. "Dmitry told me that you help him with the documents. It's so sweet of you." "Varya is more than just an assistant," Dmitry objected. "She's a talented artist. That sideboard that won an award at the exhibition was her sketch." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "Amazing. You have an art degree?" Varya answered quietly. "I graduated from a technical school with an accounting degree." "I understand." Victoria turned to Dmitry. "Dima, we need to seriously discuss the prospects of your workshop. You have golden hands, but in today's world that's not enough. We need to scale up production, hire professional designers and sales managers. I can help with the business plan and attract investment. I like my work the way it is," Dmitry began, but Victoria gently interrupted. "Think about the future. The market is changing. If you don't develop, you'll be left behind. You need a professional manager, not a..." She glanced quickly at Varya, a village assistant. Varya shuddered as if struck. A heavy silence hung in the room for a few moments. Then she stood up. Excuse me, I need to finish some work." As the door closed, Victoria shook her head. "Sweet girl. But, Dima, don't you think this situation is a bit ambiguous?" A young woman living in a single man's house. People might get the wrong idea. What kind of people? Dmitry frowned. Important clients, partners, everyone on whom the success of your business depends. That night, Dmitry couldn't sleep for a long time. Something was nagging at him. But Victoria's words about business development wouldn't leave his mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe he really was wasting his talent. The following weeks felt like treading water. Victoria came almost every day, spent long hours with Dmitry in the workshop, laying out drawings of new equipment, charting sales growth and urging him to expand his staff. Your family workshop could become a real factory, Dima. Can you imagine? Severtsev and Sons is a brand known throughout the country. I don't have sons, Dmitry quietly objected. They will, Victoria answered confidently, meaningfully shaking his hand. Arya tried to stay out of sight when Victoria arrived. She would quietly change her schedule, go out for walks with Tishka, or lock herself in her room. But Dmitry saw her haggard face, her dull gaze, and it became unbearably hard for him. The evening conversations by the fireplace ceased. Varya no longer showed him new sketches. Even Tishka seemed to sense the tension in the house. He walked around dejectedly, sighing frequently, lying at his mistress's feet. You'll have to choose, Quere declared one evening when they were alone. Either this girl or me. I'm ready to build a serious relationship with you, ready to invest in our common cause, but I'm not going to share you with strangers. Varya is not an outsider. Dmitry felt a dull irritation rise inside. Then who is she? Victoria's voice rang with metal. Serious relationships require serious decisions, Dima. It's time to make a decision. That night, returning home, Dmitry found an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a note written in neat, unwashed handwriting. Dmitry Valentinovich, thank you for everything you've done for me, but I understand that it's time to move on, Mikos. I don't want to interfere with your happiness and the progress of our business. I'll leave at the end of the week, as soon as I finish organizing the last documents. Thank you for your kindness. Varya. Something sank inside. Dmitry sat down on a chair, clutching the note in his hand. The house suddenly seemed empty, cold, alien. The thought that she would leave, that her quiet voice, soft steps, the light, scent of jasmine from her hair would no longer be there, caused almost physical pain. What am I doing? Flashed through his head, but the phone call prevented him from finishing this thought. Dima, his mother's worried voice, made him go cold. Son, your father's heart is broken again. This time it's really bad. The doctor says he needs surgery. They're sending him to a specialized center in St. Petersburg. All he could manage was, in 2 weeks, son. It's expensive, but it's not even about the money. He's really scared. The doctor said that a patient's attitude is half the battle, and your father, you know what he's like. Dmitry knew his father had always been strong, never complained. If he'd agreed to the operation, it must really bad. Mom, I'll organize everything, don't worry. His mother's voice wavered. Dima, he talks about you all the time, dreams of seeing you happy with a family. Do you understand it? I'm not young anymore, son. I want to babysit my grandchildren while I still have the strength. Maybe you do have someone. You should bring them over, introduce them. That would have been such a great encouragement to your father before the surgery. When the conversation ended, Dmitry sat for a long time, staring into space. Outside, the summer night was deepening. Cicadas chirped, dogs barked in the distance. He had to make the most important decision of his life. Varya was drawing table lamps by the light when there was a soft knock on the door. Tishka barked briefly and wagged his tail, recognizing the owner of the house. May I? Dmitry peered into the room. Of course. She put the sketchbook aside. Had something happened? He went inside and sat on the edge of the bed, nervously rubbing his hands. Var, I need your help, he began, in a hollow voice. Father has a heart condition. They're sending him to St. Petersburg for surgery. The chances are good, but he's scared. He then hesitated, choosing his words. My parents are very worried that I'm alone, especially Titi, now that my health is failing. Mom says it would give father's other strength if he saw me happy and settled. Tonamta. Varya listened silently, feeling a chill grow inside. I want to ask you. Dmitry looked up at her. come with me to meet my parents as my fiancée." Varya breathed out. "I know it sounds crazy." He raised his hands defensively. "But it will give my father the strength to survive the operation. It's so important for him to know that I'm okay, that I'm not alone." Varya turned to the window. Her heart was pounding so hard it was hard to breathe. To pretend to be Dimitri's fiancée, to play the role of the woman he loved, when in fact he'd chosen someone else. "And Victoria?" she asked quietly. "I'll explain everything to her later. Right now the main thing is my father." Varya slowly turned to him. Their eyes met. "Only until the operation," she finally said. "Then I'll leave. It will be better for everyone." "Thank you," Dimitri breathed out, giving her hand a quick squeeze. "I knew I could rely on you." When the door closed behind him, Varya sank onto the bed. Deshka jumped up next to her, rested his head on her lap, looking into her eyes with canine devotion. "You foolish heart," Varya whispered, digging her fingers into the dog's fur. Was it really possible to love so much in just 1 year? But somewhere deep inside, a tiny, almost shameful joy glimmered. At least for a little while. At least for a little while. She would be his girlfriend. She would be able to look at him openly with loving eyes, hold his hand, call him by his middle name. This would be their little happy performance. And then the road, new cities, an attempt to start all over again. But that would come later. For now, she had a few days of real happiness, even if it was just made up. An old family album with a worn velvet cover lay on the table between them. Dimitri carefully flipped through the yellowed pages, pausing at photographs of his parents. "Look, here they are, the year they met too." He pointed to a black and white photograph of a very young Tamara Ilyinishna and Valentin Mikhailovich standing at the library entrance. Her father had come to pick up a book on carpentry, and his mother was serving him. He said he fell in love at first sight. Varya looked at the photograph with interest. The young Tamara Ilyinishna, with her braided head and a formal librarian's dress, looked remarkably similar to her son. The same attentive eyes, the same subtle tilt of her head. 42 years together, Dimitri said proudly. "You know what my father says. Home and family are like good furniture. It's not just what it's made of, but how it's assembled. Every detail must be in its place." They were sitting on the veranda for the 3rd evening in a row, preparing for the performance. Their parents were supposed to arrive tomorrow. Dimitri immersed himself in memories, telling family stories, showing photographs. "Oh, Yuti, and what's this?" Varya pointed to a small velvet box he pulled out of his pocket. A ring. Dimitri opened it, revealing a simple gold ring with a tiny stone. "He bought it today. Mom doesn't like ostentation, but it would be weird to be without a ring at all." Varya carefully took the box, examining the jewelry. Her heart sank painfully. How often had she imagined a moment like this, only in completely different circumstances? "Try it on," Dimitri asked. "We need to make sure it fits." Varya obediently held out her hand. His fingers were warm and slightly rough as he slipped the ring onto her ring finger. It fit perfectly. "Now we need to agree on a story," Dimitri continued matter-of-factly, though his voice sounded strangely hoarse. "How did we meet? How long have we been together? What are our plans for the future?" "Maybe we should tell the truth," Varya suggested. "We'll meet at the gas station. Just leave out the details." "Good idea," he nodded. "Less likely to get confused." "And what about the future?" Dimitri paused. "Let's say we're planning a small wedding in the fall. Quiet, for our closest friends." Varya nodded, not looking up. She was afraid he'd see in them a reflection of the fire that ignited within her at the mere thought of a real wedding with Dimitri. He also lowered his voice as if confiding an important secret. "Mom would definitely ask about children. She was simply obsessed with grandchildren. What would we say? The truth, that we want children, but first we need to get on our feet, get a few big orders, and exhibit the workshop." Tishka, lying at their feet, suddenly raised his head and whined softly, as if sensing his mistress's tension. Can you play the part of a woman in love? Dmitri suddenly asked, looking intently at Varya. She smiled sadly. Don't worry, it will be the easiest role of my life. His parents arrived for lunch the next day. Dmitri came out to meet them at the gate and helped his father out of the taxi. Varya watched from the window as Valentin Mikhailovich, leaning on a cane, slowly walked down the path. Even from a distance, it was noticeable how thin and haggard he had become. Varenka, come and meet me, Dmitri called. She took a deep breath, straightened her formal dress, and stepped out onto the porch. There she was, our Varvara Sergeyevna. Tamara Ilyinishna, a short, plump woman with kind eyes, embraced her as if she were an old friend. Finally, she saw the girl who made our Dima happy. Valentin Mikhailovich, tall, lean, with a grey beard that vaguely resembled Hamingau, bowed ceremoniously. You're a beauty, Dima. I didn't expect such taste from you. Varya smiled shyly, feeling Dmitri's warm hand rest on her shoulder. Yeropisa. This simple gesture seemed to give her strength. Over the celebratory dinner prepared in the accident the day before, a casual conversation ensued. Tamara Ilyinishna asked about her family, her childhood, and her favorite books. Valentin Mikhailovich, initially reticent, gradually perked up when the conversation turned to the studio. Dmitri asked, Do you draw? He asked, looking intently at Varya. Yes, since childhood, she nodded. I love sketching furniture. I dream of mastering wood carving someday. In base, wonderful sketches, Dmitri said with unexpected pride. Remember the sideboard that won a prize at the regional exhibition? Was that her idea? Seriously? Valentin Mikhailovich leaned forward. Will you show me your work? Varya brought an album. Dmitri's parents looked at the drawings with interest, exchanging knowing glances. Talent, Valentin Mikhailovich concluded, genuine. Not like those fashionable designers who copy Western magazines. Finally, our Dima will have a real home. Tamara Ilyinishna smiled, looking affectionately at her son. Your lucky son. Dmitri unexpectedly took Varya's hand firmly and brought it to his lips. I know, Mom. She froze, not knowing how to react to this unexpected gesture. They hadn't discussed such details. Her cheeks flushed, her heart pounded, and her breathing, it was overwhelming. The next 2 days flew by. Varya and Tamara Ilyinishna spent a lot of time in the kitchen. The older woman happily shared her signature pie recipes, talked about her youth and how she supported her husband during the difficult 90s. You know, Varenka, she said, deftly rolling out the dough. It's important for a man to feel that he's expected at home, that he's understood. Dima has a strong character, just like his father, but if you find the way to approach him, there's no one more reliable. Varya nodded, absorbing every word. She sincerely fell in love with this wise woman who accepted her from the very first minute, without asking unnecessary questions. Valentin Mikhailovich also took a liking to her. When Dmitri was away on business, he invited Varya to his workshop, showed her his tools, and told her about the intricacies of working with different types of wood. You have an artistic eye, he remarked, as she admired the delicacy of the carved ornament on a box he'd made. And your hands seem to be growing in the right place. Try it, he handed her the chisel. Varya hesitantly took the tool and, under Valentin Mikhailovich's guidance, made a few trial runs on a piece of linden. What golden hands you have, she sincerely admired, looking at his work. Now it's clear where Dmitri gets his talent from. The old master smiled to himself. Dima has surpassed me. He has not only technique, but also a special intuition. And with your sketches, he'll go far. He paused, as if deciding on something. Then he opened an antique chest and took out a set of tools in a leather case. These are my first tools. My grandfather also used them. I wanted to give them to Dima for his anniversary, but now I see the time has come. Now he will have someone to work for. In the evenings, the four of them sat in the Gostiny. Tamara Ilyinishna told funny stories from the life of the library. Valentin Mikhailovich recalled how he started his business. The atmosphere was so warm, so family-like, that Varya sometimes forgot that it was all a game that would soon end. On the third evening, when she and Dmitri were walking their parents to their room, Tamara Ilyinishna suddenly detained them. Sit down, children. I have something to talk about. They obediently sat down. Sofa. Varya felt Dmitri tense up next to her. I see the way she's looking at you, son. Tamara Ilyinishna began softly. This is a real feeling. You can't fake it. Valentin Mikhailovich nodded. A good wife is more important than a rich one, Dima. Your mother and I's. Dmitri looked at his parents, confused. What are you talking about? About your performance, Tamara Ilyinishna. Varya turned away and rolled her eyes. Mom, I can explain, Dmitri began, but no need, son. We understand why you decided to act out this story. We didn't want to upset us before the operation. But you know what? Continued Tamara Ilyinishna. We see that there are real feelings between you. Maybe you haven't realized it yet, but it's obvious from the outside. Varya looked up at Dmitri. He looked at her with such a confused expression that it hurt her. Don't miss your happiness, son, Valentin Mikhailovich said quietly. Life flies by. I used to think I'd always have time to go fishing, to go to the mountains, and now he put his hand on his heart. The operation isn't a death sentence, but you have to be happy now, without delay. When the parents went home, Dmitri and Varya remained sitting on the sofa in complete silence. It seemed that each of them was afraid to upset the fragile balance of the moment. The next day, they decided to show their parents a picturesque lake near the village. The day was unusually warm and clear. Tamara Ilyinishna was feeding the ducks. Valentin Mikhailovich sitting on a bench who watched the fishermen. Dmitri and Varya were strolling along the shore. It's beautiful here. Varya raised her face to the sun, squinting with pleasure. I often came here to paint. I know, Dmitri answered quietly. I've seen your landscapes of this place. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded behind them. Dima, what a meeting. They turned around. Victoria stood a few steps away, elegant in a light linen suit. Next to her was a fashionably dressed young woman. Victoria. Dmitri forced a smile. Good afternoon. What a touching picture. A family idol. Victoria glanced first at Varya, then at Dmitri's parents on the bench. I didn't know you had guests. My parents are here for a few days, Dmitri answered dryly. Meet Victoria, our business partner. Nice to meet you, Tamara Ilyinishna. The mother, noticing the new people, approached them. Do you work with Dima? You could say that. Victoria smiled, but her eyes remained cold. We were discussing the prospects of modernizing his workshop, turning it into a modern production facility. Ah, that's how Tamara Ilyinishna looked questioningly at her son. These were preliminary conversations. Dmitri tensed. Dima had always been so sentimental. Victoria turned her gaze to Varya. He's clinging to outdated traditions. Right, Varvara. Everyone has their own path, Varya answered calmly, though inside she was trembling. Dmitri chose his own, and that path is the family workshop. Victoria didn't hide her irony. When it was possible to build a real business. You know, Tamara Ilyinishna suddenly interjected. My husband built this workshop with his own hands in the years when many were losing everything. And his son continued his work. Every table, every cabinet is a work of art, not a production line churn. Yes, it's not a factory, but they have something he can't buy for any money. Their own name, the good name of the Severtsev Masterschaftsman. Victoria was momentarily speechless, then nodded with a strained smile and said, of course it's a family matter, huh? I won't disturb you. Enjoy your rest. When she left, Dmitri exhaled. Thank you, Mom. For what? Tamara Ilyinishna shrugged. I just told the truth. Varya noticed Valentin Mikhailovich, who had been watching the scene from afar, nod approvingly. On the last evening before her parents' departure for St. Petersburg, when Varya went to help a neighbor with her computer, Valentin Mikhailovich called his son into the workshop. I understood everything, Dima. He began without preamble. From the first glance at you. What exactly, father? That you made up this story with the bride to make us happy before the operation? Noble but stupid, he grinned. However, I see something else too. There are real feelings between you. You just are afraid to admit them. Dmitry lowered his head. Everything is complicated, father. Life is always complicated, son. But the choice is often simple. Valentin Mikhailovich put his hand on his son's shoulder. Your mother and I give you our blessing. Don't miss your happiness. It came into your hands on its own. Rare luck. And what about the operation? Dmitry asked quietly. Are you okay? The operation will be done, his father answered firmly. And I will get better, because I want to go to your real wedding. I want to babysit my grandchildren, and for that I need to get better, do you understand? Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Dmitry glanced at the screen. Victoria. With a decisive movement, he pressed reject button and turned to his father. I understand everything, father, and you are right. I haven't noticed the most important thing for too long. The July morning was clear and crisp. Dmitry was helping his father into the backseat of a taxi while Tamara Ilyinishna hugged Varya, whispering something in her ear. Yatishka, as if understanding the importance of the moment, sat sedately by the porch, watching the guests with an attentive gaze. Well, don't worry so much. Valentin Mikhailovich patted his son on the shoulder. I'm not going to war, but to the hospital. I'll be back in a month like new. I definitely will. Dmitry hugged his father tightly, feeling his emaciated shoulders under his palms. Varya and I will come as soon as the doctors allow. Varenka, darling. Tamara Ilyinishna squeezed the girl's hands one last time. Write to us, and keep an eye on this blockhead. He's a good guy, but stubborn. When the taxi disappeared around the corner, Dmitry and Varya stood by the gate for a long time. An awkward silence hung between them. The game is over. The roles are played. What next? I think I'll go pack my things, Varya said quietly, looking down. Wait! Dmitry instinctively grabbed her hand. Let's at least have breakfast and talk. She nodded hesitantly, and they returned to the house, where the smell of Mom's pies and Dad's cologne still lingered. Boss, what's wrong? Are you down in the dumps? Boss glanced into the workshop, where Dmitry had been fruitlessly trying to work on a new order for 2 hours now. Something wrong with Dad? No, everything's fine. The operation was scheduled for next week. Then what? Stas sat down at the workbench. Has Varya left or something? No, for now. Dmitry had put the plane down. Bo was getting ready. She says her role is played. It's time to move on. What role? Stas frowned. Dmitry sighed heavily and told his friend the whole story about Victoria, about his father's illness, about the performance with the fake bride. You're something else, Stas whistled. And now what? I don't know. Dmitry ran his hand over his face. The parents are gone. Victoria calls every day, demanding he make up his mind. Accident is packing. Boss, you're afraid? To confess. I see how you look at her. Everyone sees it, but she's much younger than me. So what? She's not 16. She's a grown woman, and she looks at you in a way that even makes me jealous. Dmitry fell silent, lost in his memories. The 6 months of quarrels truly were the happiest of his life. Her laughter spreading through the house like sunlight. Her care, unobtrusive, tactful, as if she always knew what he needed. Her creative ideas, which gave the old workshop a second wind, but most importantly, the feeling of peace and fullness of life that appeared with her arrival. What, he finally said, you're right, miss. We need to dot the T's and crosses with Victoria first. Victoria arrived an hour after the call, entering the house as if she already owned it. She placed the folder with documents on the table. I've prepared a business plan for modernization. She began without preamble. I found equipment suppliers. There are financing options. Victoria. Dmitry gently interrupted her. We need to talk. An honest talk. He looked at him intently, then slowly closed the folder. I'm listening. We want different things, he said simply. You see my business as one that needs to be expanded, modernized, brought to the next level. But for me, this is a family craft. It's a continuation of my father's work, his father's. It's not just a source of income. And you're ready to give up prospects for sentimental memories? There was genuine confusion in her voice. This isn't sentimentality, it's choosing one's path. Victoria paused, tapping her nails on the table. It's not just about business, right? She finally asked. It's because of this girl. Dmitri nodded. Yes, I love her. You choose poverty over success? Victoria's voice was bitter. Wasting away in the village over a normal life. I choose happiness over profit, Dmitri answered quietly. Forgive me. To his surprise, Victoria suddenly smiled. Sadly, but without anger. You know, I'm almost jealous. There are so few true feelings these days. She gathered the documents in her bag and headed for the exit. She turned around at the threshold. I hope you won't regret it. She's a good girl. Just don't let her turn you into a provincial shoemaker. You really have talent. When Victoria closed the door, Dmitri felt a strange relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Now all that remained was the last, most important conversation. He found Varya in the studio. She was sitting on a stool by the window, a sketchbook in her hands, pencils spread out on her lap. A golden ray of sunlight fell on her bowed head, highlighting her chestnut locks. Dmitri paused in the threshold, afraid to frighten the moment. Finally, she felt his presence and looked up. I just wanted to finish the sketch. This is for you. She held out the sketchbook. A new idea for a bookcase. Dmitri glanced at the drawing, but didn't examine it. Instead, he sat down opposite Varya on a low stool so that their eyes were at the same level. Varya, I don't want our game to end, he said, quietly, but firmly. She frowned in confusion. But the parents have already left. The performance is over. I'm not talking about the performance. I'm talking about us. About what happened before my parents arrived, and what might happen next. Varya looked away, her fingers nervously fiddled with her pencil. But I'm a simple girl from technical school, and you have Victoria, educated, successful. Victoria laughed, but completely, Dmitri interrupted. We want different things from life. She could give you everything, connections, money, prospects, and you give me what's most important. He carefully took her hands in his. You are an artist, a real one, with a gift from God. You make my house a home. You are my happiness. I love you, Varya. She looked at him with wide eyes in which mistrust, hope, and fear flickered. What will people say? She finally whispered. I was your servant. Will they think that I am what you are? What? And what will your heart say? Dmitri asked quietly. Varya lowered her eyes. Her eyelashes fluttered. A blush appeared on her cheeks. My heart. I loved you, but I was afraid to dream. You seemed so unattainable. My own business, my own home, and I was nothing, penniless. You are the richest person I know. Dmitri gently touched her cheek. You have such a heart, such talent. Stay with me forever. They left the workshop holding hands like children. The old birch tree, the very same one that is the first to turn green in the spring and the last to shed its leaves in the fall. Dmitri stopped, gently put his arm around Varya's shoulders, looked into her eyes, and kissed her for the first time. There were no fireworks. Time didn't stand still. It was just a quiet summer day. The rustling of leaves overhead, the smell of freshly planed wood from the workshop, and two people who found each other by chance, by a happy twist of fate. 6 months later, the courtyard of the Severitsev house was unusually crowded. They decided to have a simple wedding at home, surrounded by their closest friends. Valentin Mikhailovich, noticeably stronger after a successful operation, poured homemade wine into glasses. Tamara Ilyishna bustled around the festive table with Stas's wife. Bitter! The guests shouted, and the newlyweds kissed shyly. Varya looked beautiful in a simple white dress she'd sewn herself. A modest wreath of wildflowers hung in her hair. Happiness was in her eyes. Near the porch, watched by the children, Tishka spoke solemnly while 5 fluffy puppies trotted behind him. He had sired a neighbor's German shepherd. The former vagabond's entire demeanor spoke of complete contentment. The Severtsev's workshop was flourishing. Varia's sketches were always popular with clients. Moreover, at Tamara Ilyinichna's initiative, Varia began running a creative studio at the local community center, where she taught children drawing and the basics of design. Where are the newlyweds? Tamara Ilyinichna suddenly remembered not finding her son and daughter-in-law at the table. There they are. Stas nodded toward the workshop. Dmitry and Varia stood at the entrance to the family workshop. Next to them was Valentin Mikhailovich, holding his little grandson Stas's firstborn. And the three of them examined the new sign. Severtsev Workshop, founded in 1993. Dad, do you think we'll make it? Shan, asked Dmitry, putting his arm around Varia's shoulders. We already have, son. Valentin Mikhailovich smiled into his mustache, looking at the happy couple. The main thing is not just creating beautiful things, but creating a beautiful life. The winter sun illuminated this picture. The generations of the Severtsev family at the entrance to the workshop, the past, present, and future of the family business. And who knows, maybe the little boy in his grandfather's arms will also one day pick up instruments and continue the family tradition. For now, Dmitry and Varia stood at the threshold of their shared life, united by that very happy chance that changed their destinies forever. Boom. Thank you for spending this time with us and listening to the story to the end. Share your thoughts, because each story you share in the comments brings our channel to life, and always cherish the truth of your feelings. After all, every life has its own unique voice. Vitally read for you. We will hear you. We wish you good health and more warmth in your homes. Vitali read for you from the Dom Audio Storky channel.